This is the first of two parts on who studies animals and why. Well, one group are, for lack of a better term, semi-professional amateurs. These are people who are not scientists, they have day jobs, but are so interested in their hobbies involving animals that they actually can provide some very useful contributions to animal behavior. This is one situation. This is one person, Crawford Greenwald, who actually was, I believe, president of DuPont. That was his day job. And if he wasn't president, he certainly was very high up in that organization, in that company, rather. But he was an avid bird watcher, and he wrote a very scholarly book on hummingbirds that people reference to this day who study hummingbird behavior and other aspects of hummingbirds. He also followed that up with an incredibly complex book on birdsong involving both the acoustic analysis of birdsong as well as the physiology, meaning how birds anatomically go about producing very complex songs. It's a highly technical book, and I've not seen anything come along since then that is really quite as good and comprehensive as this one. Eliot Howard was, and again, I think president of Stewart's and Lloyd's, which was a steel company that originated in the UK. And he wrote the very first book dealing with territoriality, and it happened to focus on birds. It was called Territory in Bird Life. I believe this was back in the 1920s, thereabouts. And of course, territoriality is something that's been studied a lot since then in a variety of species. So, we also have agricultural scientists who study animal behavior because they have to know something about animal husbandry and how animals need certain types of environments in order to foster reproductive behavior. And a variety of books are available in this area. There's many books that deal only with the behavior of domestic animals, including the one that you see over on the left, The Behavior of Domestic Animals, that's been through several editions. It's an edited volume, and different chapters deal with different groups of animals. And Abnormal Behavior in Animals, which I believe is out of print, it's a very hard to come by book. I happen to have a copy. And there's some very interesting chapters in there dealing with problems that different types of animals exhibit that might interfere with effective breeding. There's one, actually, it's called, I think it's Nymphomania in Cows, is the title of the chapter, or something like that. There's another chapter in there on perinatal behavior in thoroughbred racehorses that deals with things that you should be considering if you're a breeder of racehorses around the time that the animals are actually born. That's what perinatal means. It incorporates both the late prenatal and the early postnatal period in terms of developing champion racehorses. So some really interesting chapters in that particular book, all dealing with animal husbandry issues. Wildlife biologists, obviously, of a variety of types. One group, for example, conservationists, that are really concerned about all kinds of issues that put animal species at risk. Climate change, of course, being one. Land use, how people are expanding cities into areas that previously were inhabited only by non-human animals, and how that's impacting various aspects of their behavior. I mean, this was just published in 2014. It's a projection based on some comprehensive data that have come together. I think it was funded by the U.S. Geological Service and involved many, many different species of birds. I'm only showing one example here, the hooded warbler. If you look at the distribution of the hooded warbler in North America in 2001, you can see green means that there's a lot there. Red, well, there is no red in this particular species. But you can see this is the range the range of hooded warblers. Most of them are in this area, and there are some out on the fringes. But look at these scenarios based on different projected models. None of them look good. Notice that the range has shifted northward for this species. Here we do see red, and that means a reduction in the distribution of this particular species in these areas. So where they were plentiful in 2001, each of these scenarios shows that by 2075, this goes out to the year 2075, we're not going to be seeing a whole lot of this particular species in areas where we see them now. And this is pretty much what they found for most of the species that they looked at, and they did look at many, many different species of birds. So conservationists obviously very concerned about climate change and the impact on animals and animal behavior. Here's an example of a bird that did go extinct in 1934. You will not find them anymore. They used to live in Hawaii. They're called the oo, the Hawaiian oo. And actually, there was a captive male. So while they were no longer in the wild, there were a couple that people managed to keep in captivity, and they're long gone. But in 1980, they actually managed to get a voice recording of one of these captive males, which is a good way for me to introduce something that you'll be seeing a lot in this course, the sound spectrogram. And basically, it's a visual representation of sound. It was developed originally for studying human speech, but has been used extensively by animal behaviorists who study animal vocalizations, whether they be birds, mammals, reptiles, or anything else for that matter, crickets. And basically, you're looking at frequency or pitch over time. So I'm using this human-generated wolf whistle because it's something that people are familiar with. And you can see that if we listen to the wolf whistle, the recording, you can see how the shape of the two notes follows the frequency of what it is you're hearing. So here it is. So here we have the Hawaiian oo, a sound spectrogram. So something you will no longer hear in the wild, or in captivity for that matter, and not in the wild since 1934. Again, along the line of conservation, hole nesting ducks. Most duck species nest on the ground. They're ground nesters, but there are some that actually nest in cavities of trees. Now, they're not able to actually create the cavities. They have to use cavities that have been created by primarily woodpeckers, and then they proceed to occupy them and use them as nest sites. So here's an example.
It's spring in the great broad-leaved forests of Eastern Europe and Asiatic Russia. The mandarin ducks are courting. The female mandarin nests in a tree hole, and when it's time for everyone to leave, she leads the way. The ducklings are only 24 hours old. It's a long drop, and a few calls of encouragement are required. Two down, 7 to go. still 2 missing. All present and correct. But they won't be safe until they reach water, and the forest pool is almost a mile away.
By the way, they're not all that safe in the water either. I've spent several years in the field studying the closest relative of the mandarin duck. And the mandarin duck, of course, is from Asia. But the North American species, the one that's the only other species in the same genus as the mandarin duck, and that's the North American wood duck, which we actually have around in Connecticut, which are also, of course, hole nesting species. But in watching this event, which we call the nest exodus, the ducklings are being called out of the nest by the hen. They actually have to actively be called. If the hen just leaves the nest, they're not going to follow her. So the call is very important. But in any event, I've seen them go onto the pond, and in some cases there can be snapping turtles or large fish that just kind of yank them right underwater and proceed to eat them. So they're not totally safe there, but at least they are safe from terrestrial predators. Speaking of wood ducks, so not quite as gaudy perhaps as the mandarin duck, but still pretty well decorated, the male with the female in the background. Now, in the case of the wood ducks, they were close to being put on the endangered species list some decades ago. In fact, they may actually have made it onto that list. That part I'm not quite sure of. But the reason for that is because of the male's feathers. So hunters were over-hunting wood duck males because they wanted those very colorful feathers to make flies with for fishing purposes. And so because of that, it's very hard to regulate that kind of thing. Of course, people try, but lots of luck with that. And remembering, of course, that they cannot build their own nest sites, but have to rely on pre-existing ones, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service started to advocate that people who live on or near ponds actually construct wood duck boxes in the range that wood ducks actually occupy. There's a whole eastern United States population. There's also some in the west. And so basically they laid out the specs. They showed how easy it is for people to actually assemble these things and put them together, and then it's just a matter of hanging them on trees, either above land or above water. Doesn't matter. And they look there's variations of that. I noticed the hinge on this one is in the front, so it flips open from behind. The ones that we had, actually, the hinge was on the back and it flipped open from the front, and that's to help clean out the box, get rid of any snakes or screech owls or other things that shouldn't be in there, which was a huge part of my job actually while I was studying these animals in the field. Anyway, it brought the population back because you'll find these all over the place, despite the fact that other creatures do have their designs on these nest boxes.
One of the major hurdles with a conservation program using nest boxes is that their conspicuousness is picked up on by black bears. And black bears tend to smash these boxes and eat all the contents, all the eggs that are inside.
So, of course, that's huge damage right there. That box has to be yanked down and a new one needs to be put up. But, I once yanked a raccoon, not the one you see in this picture, that's actually freeing itself out of one of our boxes. That was a very tricky thing to do because I didn't know if I was dealing with a rabid animal or not. And I still don't to this day, but I managed to get it out of there. I'm not going to bore you with the details. Okay, so pest control. Wildlife biologists that are involved in trying to reduce the numbers of animals where they are too plentiful and try to move them elsewhere. We've seen that in New England with deer populations where the hunting season's been somewhat expanded a bit. Of course, those are not wildlife biologists, those are hunters, but at least they are hopefully eating whatever it is they're shooting. But people don't eat prairie dogs. So there have been areas out west where prairie dogs have been a bit of a nuisance just because of the large numbers that have occurred. Now, I'm going to show you a video clip that is quite old. There is no current version of this, so bear with me on this, but it shows a program that actually worked out pretty well in terms of reducing the number of prairie dogs without actually killing them.
Colorado may be a home where the majestic buffalo once roamed, but all you see around these days is a bunch of puny little prairie dogs scurrying around, chewing up the alfalfa fields, and digging holes that fracture farm machinery and livestock. Farmers like Walt Eartell have tried everything to get rid of the little critters, to no avail.
We're going dogging today.
Like drilling for oil, it took a little time. But soon enough, they struck gold.
There you go.
What's the airspeed
Probably
coming
about
out of
300 miles an hour.
300?
Yeah.
Wow. For the prairie dogs, it's sort of a psychedelic thrill ride.
You want to go in and catch him?
No.
No?
The dogs land unscathed in the padded truck.
He's probably less than happy, but it could be worse for him.
In fact, it just may be the best thing that can happen to a prairie dog. Gets him out of the food chain where he can relax. There goes another one.
He's a little surprised.
You think he's surprised now? Wait till he sees where he's going. Some of them receive all-expense-paid trips to downtown Tokyo, where the little pests are trendy pets, selling for as much as $1,000 a pair. In this area of nearly tapped-out gold, silver, and platinum mines, these two are tapping into another underground mother lode and helping restore America's balance of trade.
So there you go. There's your prairie dog vacuum. By the way, it does get them out of the food chain. I'm not so sure they're all that thrilled about where they end up in Tokyo. This is in Tokyo, in a pet shop. There are some animals that maybe don't make the best pets, but I'm not going to prejudge because I've never tried having a pet prairie dog. I have had pet raccoons, and that actually worked out pretty well. So who knows? Maybe prairie dogs adapt well. I have no idea. Okay, zoo and aquaria keepers obviously interested in animal behavior. This is at Mystic Marine Life Aquarium, where as part of the public demonstrations, they'll actually call the dolphins on stage and point out various anatomical features like the blowhole and the flipper design and stuff like that. And by the way, a Mystic Marine Life Aquarium, one of the nice things that I like about that is if you look at the individual tanks where they have the smaller specimens, they're actually organized by behavior. So there's a tank having to do with territoriality, for example, and they'll have some fish in there that are quite territorial. So you can actually look at these things by behavior type and then see the behaviors actually happening in front of you, which is very nice. So yes, zoo and aquaria keepers very much concerned with animal behavior. As are systematic biologists who study evolutionary relationships. In other words, they classify animals, and they use, among many other features, including DNA, of course, behavior. They sometimes use behavior as a taxonomic tool along with anatomy, DNA, and all these other kinds of things. Of course, DNA is sort of a recent arrival on the scene that was not available until around the 1990s. And so people had to rely primarily on anatomical features, and behavior was used probably a little bit more than it might be used now, but it's still used to some extent. And of course, people are always discovering new species, and they have to classify them, and sometimes even create new categories where categories don't exist that accommodate some of these things that are now found. Now this one was accommodated. This is a giant, big red jellyfish that was first discovered in 1993, and scientists finally got a closer view several years later, and they actually created a new subfamily among the jellyfish for this one because it just did not fit in with any of the other subfamilies that existed. The Yeti crab discovered in 2006, squidworm 2010, and then in 2014, a new genus was created for these species. The genus is called Dendrogramma, and there were 2 new species that were found off the coast of Australia, and there was no place to put them in the existing taxonomic classification scheme. So a whole new genus was created for these guys. You may never have heard about the snailfish because not a whole lot is known about them, especially about their behavior, because they're found at very deep depths in the ocean, and it's very hard to get down there and study them. But a team was sent down in some kind of a vessel in 2014, and they found a new species that they've never seen before. It's the one that is at the deepest depths ever. They've never seen any kind of fish down there, but they saw this one. So it's described here, 8,143 meters, meaning 26,700 feet deep. Translucent body, broad wing fins, and an eel-like tail. And here it comes. Almost looks like some kind of a ghost. In fact, one newspaper reported it as a ghost fish. I don't think that's what they're going to end up calling it, though. But really, really unique looking animal. I mean, I've seen pictures of other snailfish. They don't look quite like that. So that's something that the systematic biologists are going to have to grapple with in terms of trying to find out how indeed they're going to classify it in terms of its relationship to known species of snailfish. Among primates, 2004, this, should I attempt to even say it, Arunachal, I'm probably slaughtering that, macaque, was discovered in 2004. Now you would think, wow, primates. I thought that people would already have known about primates. They're more accessible than jellyfish, for example. Not totally. They were found in a desolate area of northeast India where people don't really go very often. Certainly not scientists. And so that's why it probably took so long for these guys to actually have been noticed. This is something called a hairy Saki monkey. Now, this one is not a newly discovered species, but I just want to show this to you for a reason that you'll see in a moment. Rather unusual looking monkey, hairy Saki monkey. You may never have seen anything quite like this before. Now, more recently, like 2014, 5 new species of Saki monkeys were discovered in South America, and we have photographs here of 2 of those, Isabel's and Mittermeier's Tapajos Saki monkeys. So, and you can see the names over there on the left. So 5 new species were discovered in South America of these Saki monkeys.
Mayor, the geologist is here to see you.
My geologist? Now? Tell him the infection is fine and I don't need another checkup.
No, Mayor, that's a gynecologist. A geologist studies the Earth.
Don't you think I know that? How dare you insult my intellect? I went to Princeton, for God's sake. You get out of my office!
I'm not in your office, Mayor. I'm talking to you through a speaker.
Just send in the geometrist.
Geologist.
You are fired, buddy!
Thank you, Mayor. It's been great working for you.
So a lot of other ologists are interested in studying animal behavior, zoologists. Ethology, by the way, is the study of animal behavior. Now, pharmacologists are interested in this because they typically use animals as models, especially in terms of testing new types of drugs.
The mini pyrotechnics of fireflies could prove to be lightning in a bottle for drug researchers. Radiologist David Punica-Worms and his team are using a firefly protein to make mouse cells glow when triggered by a drug. When they sedate the mice and put them under a special camera, they can see changes in the glow in real time. In this experiment, they put the glowing protein into tumor cells treated by an experimental cancer drug.
You're actually looking at how much of the drug got in and affected the target protein, because that protein is now fused to the glowing firefly protein. So you have a much more precise tool for understanding the molecular targeting of the drug.
As he and his team reported in the journal Nature Methods, the new technique could make tests of many kinds of new drugs faster and more efficient, and the technique does not harm the animals.
You can just image the animals over and over and over again for hours and hours and days on end at any type of time interval that you want.
His study on the cancer drug took 5 days and required only 30 mice. He says it normally might have taken 6 months and 300 mice.
And of course you have to destroy the cells or the animal in order to study these particular proteins.
A kinder, gentler, and faster way to get from here to here.
So that's a great new alternative in terms of the pharmaceutical industry. Spider webs. Okay, so when I was a postdoc in North Carolina, there was another scientist in our research lab who was a pharmacologist, and he studied species-typical behaviors of spiders in captivity. And in particular, because he was a pharmacologist, he was looking at the effect of administering drugs to spiders and how that affected web-building behavior, because each species of spiders has a very unique type of web. And drugs can easily disrupt motor activity, like if you've had too much alcohol or whatever, your motor activity, your movement is going to be affected in various ways. And the same is true with spiders. And so he was using this as a model for looking at how drugs actually work in a very simple type of nervous system. But before I show you what he did, why don't we look at this?
The wood spider is the most accomplished of all web-building species. Recently, scientists gave these tiny creatures a variety of psychoactive drugs to observe their effects on web building. When given a minute dose of LSD, the spider's web took on an unfamiliar, minimalist structure. When given caffeine, the web structure was not affected, but the spider's behavior was. Given THC, the active ingredient in marijuana, the spider didn't build a web. It built a hammock, where it lay all day and watched the caffeine spider go. When given alcohol, the spider built a web, found a mate, and raised over 100 young. But the mate got a restraining order, and now the spider can't go within 100 centimeters of the web. The crack cocaine spider figured building webs was for suckers, waited till the caffeine spider was exhausted, then came up behind it and popped a cap in its ass. Nice web, Mr. Crack Spider. When winter came, the marijuana spider had no place to live. It ended up in the crack web as the crack spider's bitch.
Okay, I couldn't resist showing that. So obviously that's not real. Probably when you saw the hammock, that's when that would have been the dead giveaway that there was something wrong with this. Okay, moving on. So here we have the real science. So there's a normal web. Okay, chloral hydrate totally disrupts this web. It's basically a depressant. It can actually put you to sleep. Colloquially, many years ago, decades and decades ago, it used to be called a Mickey Finn. If you've ever heard the expression that somebody slipped someone else a Mickey, basically it was some form of chloral hydrate. Something you don't want to be doing, by the way. This is a stimulant, and you can see that even though it's a stimulant, it severely disrupted the web structure, going back to the way that normal web actually looked. And this is caffeine, so it really does. They're not building a hammock. This really does disrupt normal web building behavior, and a spider's going to have a very difficult time catching anything in a web that's built like that. But look at LSD. Unlike the the clip I just showed you, it doesn't disrupt web building in a negative way. If anything, it's a super web. It looks even better than the normal web. This spider must have been so incredibly turned on to what he or she was doing that it's like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to make it even better than normal. Anyway, pharmacology. Let's see, who else? Anthropologists, primarily because of primates. So and there's many anthropologists who study primate behavior in the wild, and so therefore they are obviously hugely involved in the study of animal behavior. Psychologists of many types. I'll just mention one subgroup called comparative psychologists. This is the same as ethologists, except they're trained in psychology graduate programs instead of zoology graduate programs. Comparative psychology is in fact the study of animal behavior, just like ethology is. Neuroscientists, obviously, but typically use animals as models for looking at the effect of various types of manipulations of the nervous system on behavior. Okay, the pet and pest industry is involved in the study of animal behavior, and maybe probably not so much the scientific study of animal behavior, but they most certainly are attuned to some of that literature in terms of looking at ways of making sure that pets are well cared for in terms of dietary considerations, maybe the best kind of toys to provide for pets, things like that. The pest industry, for obvious reasons, trying to get rid of various types of animals that are nuisances. Birdhouses. That, by the way, that birdhouse over on the left, that is pretty awesome. It's a real birdhouse. It's not mine. I don't own that. These squirrel baffles that people try to put on poles that house these various types of feeding boxes for birds to try to keep the squirrels out. They're usually not very effective. This is right outside my front window, and right over here you can see a squirrel that's made its way from a nearby tree over to, jumped right on top of this hummingbird feeder. Not hummingbird. Oh yeah, woodpecker. It's a woodpecker feeder. We have a hummingbird feeder. Actually, it's right over here. But the pole, it's on top of this pole. So, it didn't go this way. It just jumped from a nearby tree to get right there. And here it is helping itself to one of these woodpecker type cakes that you stick inside this thing. And, bears are not deterred very much, even if you try to hook your feeder up on a rope rather. Bears will find a way, as this guy's doing, and has made its way right over to the feeder and is having a lovely time eating birdseed. By the way, that bear sort of reminds me of Adventure Park in Stores or any of the other adventure parks around the country that have zip lines for people to walk on. So bears kind of like to do that too. Well, earlier in this segment, I was talking about conservationists and their efforts to help animals avoid becoming extinct. Well, not all those efforts have been successful despite incredible attempts, and one such case is Lonesome George. Lonesome George is the name that was given to the last of the Galapagos giant tortoises. In fact, by species standards, George was kind of on the smaller side, but still a member of this particular species. They tried various things. They tried mating it with subspecies of the Galapagos giant tortoises, but none of that worked. The eggs turned out to not hatch, and there were no female Galapagos giant tortoises around. So George died in 2012, and that is when this species became totally extinct. And I thought that it might be kind of nice to end this segment with a musical tribute that's been put out on behalf of Lonesome George.
just a giant tortoise, the last one of his kind. 100-year-old reptile, not even past his prime. Everybody knew his name, but he left this world alone. He saw love all around him, but no love to call his own. Lonesome George, he's gone his lonesome way, never more to walk the shore beside Tortuga Bay. Lonesome George, spread your angel wings and fly. Go and meet your tortoise lady on that island in the sky. Well, the sailors ate his mother, and the goats starved out his friends. If he ever had a lover, I guess he lost her in the end. Oh, he didn't fall to pieces, no, he didn't fall apart. But beneath that sturdy tortoise shell beat a broken tortoise heart. Lonesome George, he's gone his lonesome way, never more to walk the shore beside Tortuga Bay. Lonesome George, spread your angel wings and fly. Go and meet your tortoise lady on that island in the sky. George, they brought you ladies, but they weren't your type. You tried to make some babies, but it didn't feel right. I understand why you'd pay 10 grand to have her back by your side. If tortoises were criers, George, I know you would have cried. Lonesome George, he's gone his lonesome way, never more to walk the shore beside Tortuga Bay. Lonesome George, spread your angel wings and fly. Go and meet your tortoise lady. Go and meet your tortoise lady. Go and meet your tortoise lady on that island in the sky.